Have you ever looked in the mirror at 40 and wondered, how did I get here? Not in anger, not in panic, but in quiet confusion. Life moved, and you moved with it. You made choices, some good, some not. You carried responsibilities, endured heartbreaks, worked jobs that paid the bills but drained your spirit. And then one morning, it hits you. Time has passed and you are no longer becoming, you are being. And yet something inside still whispers that it is not too late to begin again. There is a strange kind of grief that comes with middle age. Not the kind that comes from loss, but the kind that comes from awakening. You begin to see clearly how much time you have wasted, how many words you left unsaid. The regrets may visit you in silence, but they are loud in your heart. Still, there is a choice in that moment. To shrink into the comfort of routine or to rise and rebuild. This is not just about reinventing your career or chasing dreams you left behind. It is deeper than that. It is about reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried along the way. The courage to say no. The discipline to break patterns. The grace to forgive your past self and stop measuring your worth by other people's timelines. Rebuilding your life after 40 does not require a miracle. It requires mastery of 100 small but profound lessons that shift how you see yourself, others, and the world. And in this journey, you will not be starting from zero. You are starting from wisdom. From scars that taught you what no book could. From mistakes that humbled you, and silent victories that no one applauded. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This is not just a quote. It is a strategy. Because the first lesson in rebuilding your life is understanding where your true power lies. Not in changing the world, but in mastering your inner world. If this message moved you, share it with someone who needs it. Most people spend the first half of their lives trying to fit in and the second half trying to remember who they were before the world told them who to be. That is where the real work begins. You see, there is nothing inherently wrong with comfort, but comfort has a quiet cost. It dulls your hunger. It teaches you to settle. It convinces you that survival is enough. But you were not born just to survive. You were born to live with depth, with meaning, with intention. Epictetus taught that it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That lesson alone can rewrite your life. Because once you stop blaming your past, your parents, the economy, or the years you think you have wasted, then you begin to take full authorship. Responsibility is not a burden. It is a door. And on the other side of that door is freedom. Think of your life as a house. Maybe the foundation cracked. Maybe some rooms are dark and neglected. But you are still the architect. You can tear down the walls that no longer serve you. You can rebuild, repurpose, restore. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But intentionally. With patience. With presence. And with a deep knowing that you are worthy of the home you are about to build within yourself. This video is your blueprint. Over the next chapters you will be handed 100 lessons, some ancient, some modern, all tested by time and truth. Lessons that will help you let go of bitterness, reclaim your energy, choose your battles wisely, and finally feel peace when you are alone with your own thoughts. There is no magic age when life starts making sense. But there is a moment when you decide to stop waiting. There comes a moment in life when silence becomes louder than noise. When you sit in your car after a long day and realize you do not want to go home, not because it is a bad place, but because you no longer recognize who you are in it. When the laughter of others feels distant and your own thoughts sound like questions without answers. That moment is not weakness. It is awakening. Because the truth is, Life after 40 has a way of stripping illusions. You begin to see clearly what mattered and what never did. Many people spend years running from mistakes, from conversations they should have had, from dreams they told themselves were childish. But what you run from does not disappear. It waits. It waits in your reflection. It waits in your sleepless nights. It waits in the quiet guilt that follows temporary pleasure. And eventually, it asks you to stop. To face it. Not with shame, but with strength. Because the first real step to rebuilding is not punishing yourself for the past. It is owning it with dignity. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." You carry regrets like weights, but often it is your judgment of yourself, not the actions themselves, that hurts most. You replay moments, rehearse better versions, wish for second chances. But here is the paradox: when you stop fighting the past, you finally gain power over the present. You begin to respond, not react. You begin to build, not just remember. Responsibility is not the same as self minus blame. Responsibility says, I did what I knew at the time, but now I know better, and I choose differently. That is maturity. That is self minus respect. You can love who you were without wanting to stay that way. You can honor your old story while writing a new one. That shift in mindset alone will liberate you more than any apology, any validation, or any external success ever could. Think of your life like a garden neglected for too long. Weeds of old habits, overgrown paths of indecision, cracked fences of poor boundaries. But under the surface, the soil still holds life. It is not dead. It is waiting. You do not need to plant everything at once. You just need to begin. Pull one weed, water one seed, fix one broken gate. The act of tending day after day becomes your transformation. And here is a truth no one tells you in your 20s: success feels different at 40. It is no longer about applause. It is about alignment. It is about waking up without dread, going to bed without regret. It is about being able to sit with yourself and not need distraction to feel okay. That is wealth. That is power. And that is the reward of a life rebuilt from within. So the first lesson is simple, but it is not easy. Stop waiting for someone to rescue you. No one is coming. Not because people do not care, but because they are busy rescuing themselves. Your healing, your growth, your peace, these are your job. And when you take that job seriously, the world begins to respond in kind. Life becomes less about what you can get and more about who you can become. Subscribe for more truths that shift your perspective. One small action today can change the entire trajectory of the next 10 years. But you have to believe that effort matters. That you matter. That this version of you, older, may be a little bruised, maybe a little quieter, is not broken. It is becoming more honest, more aware, more grounded. And in that becoming, there is beauty. Not the kind that needs a filter, but the kind that shines in your eyes when you finally stop pretending. There is a quiet war that begins when you stop living to impress and start living to express. For years, you followed the script: graduate, get the job, find a partner, build the life. And maybe you did all that. Or maybe some pieces never came together. But either way, you looked around and asked yourself, is this it? That is not selfish. That is human. The world taught you to chase approval, but your soul is asking for authenticity. And at 40, the question becomes too loud to ignore. Many people live their entire lives performing, smiling when they are tired, agreeing when they want to scream, saying yes to things that drain them because they are afraid of being seen as difficult, ungrateful, or alone. But that is not peace, it is compliance. and slowly it corrodes your spirit. You begin to forget who you are beneath the masks. But here is the truth: the most dangerous prison is the one you do not see, the one built from other people's expectations. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That is a radical idea in a world obsessed with image. But he was right. Because growth looks awkward. Healing feels strange. Choosing yourself over approval can look like rebellion. And yet, it is in those moments when you disappoint others to honor yourself that you start to live with real integrity. Letting go of who the world thinks you should be is not abandonment. It is alignment. You are not here to meet everyone's standards. You are here to meet your own soul. And that requires courage. The courage to say, I'm done pretending. The courage to walk away from a title, a role, a relationship that no longer fits. The courage to start small, to rebuild from honesty, not illusion. There is a moment in every journey where you will be misunderstood. That is the price of authenticity. But it is also the birth of freedom. Because when you stop trying to be everything for everyone, you finally have energy to be something real for yourself. That shift is not loud. It is subtle. You begin to speak more softly but more truthfully. You begin to smile, not to please, but because you actually feel peace. That is what reclaiming your life feels like. So the next lesson is this: stop negotiating your worth with the world. You do not need permission to matter. You do not need a milestone to feel proud. You do not need validation to begin again. Your existence, your breath, your story, they are already enough. Every moment you choose truth over comfort, alignment over applause, you rebuild your foundation. Stronger, simpler, real. There is a beauty in being over 40 that no one tells you about. You no longer seek noise. You seek meaning. You stop chasing everything and start choosing a few things that truly matter. And in that simplicity, life becomes rich again. Not in dollars, in depth, in clarity, in calm. So ask yourself, if you stripped away all the roles, the labels, the titles, who would you be? That answer is not lost. It is just buried. And now is the time to dig, to rediscover, to return. Discipline is not punishment. It is self minus respect. It is how you show up for yourself when no one is watching. At 40, you begin to realize that most of the battles you face are not out there. They are within. The temptations, the doubts, the distractions, those are the true enemies of progress. And the weapon is not willpower. It is clarity. Clarity about who you want to become, and the quiet, consistent actions that lead you there. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have to assemble your life yourself, action by action." He did not say inspiration by inspiration. He did not say feeling by feeling. He said action. Because feelings are fleeting. Motivation fades. But habits shape your destiny. When you build structure around your values, you create a path. And the path builds momentum. Not overnight. But with each choice, you begin to shift your identity from someone who reacts to someone who creates. Self minus discipline is often misunderstood. People think it means denying yourself pleasure. But the truth is, it means protecting your peace. It means choosing long minus term joy over short minus term comfort. It means waking up early not to impress anyone, but because you know your mind is clearest before the world wakes up. It means saying no to drama, to laziness, to that third glass of wine, not because you are rigid, but because you are committed to a deeper peace. There is a certain pride that comes from doing the hard thing, especially when no one sees it. That quiet sense of integrity, of walking your talk, of living in alignment with your own code. That is where true confidence comes from. Not appearance, not possessions, but self-minus trust. The ability to keep a promise to yourself again and again until it becomes who you are. You do not need a complicated system. You need consistency. Choose 3 things and show up for them every day. Move your body. Write your thoughts. Honor your word. That alone can change everything. Because you begin to prove to yourself that you are reliable. And once you become reliable to yourself, the world starts to shift. People respect those who respect their own time and energy. But there will be days when you slip. You will hit snooze. You will break the routine. You will feel like giving up. That is part of the process. What matters is not perfection. What matters is what you do next. Forgive the lapse, but do not excuse the pattern. Return. Recommit. Rebuild. Every day is a new vote for the kind of life you want to live. The next lesson is this: if you want to feel different, you have to live different. You cannot think your way into a new life. You must act your way there. That means sacrificing some comforts. That means being misunderstood. That means showing up even when you do not feel like it. But over time, the habits you build will build you. Remember, discipline is not a burden. It is a gift. A compass. A way to remind yourself who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. There is a moment, often after 40, when the noise begins to fade and what remains is silence. Not the peaceful kind. The hollow kind. The kind that echoes when you sit alone and realize how much of your life has been filled with motion but not meaning. Friends grow distant. The phone does not ring as often. The routines you once relied on begin to feel empty. But within that silence lies your greatest opportunity. Because when the world quiets, your soul speaks. Most people fear being alone because they confuse it with being abandoned. But solitude is not punishment. It is a doorway. A sacred space where you can finally hear your own thoughts without interruption, where you stop performing and start reflecting. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And how can you master yourself if you are never truly alone with who you are? The loneliness you feel is not weakness. It is signal. It is your heart telling you it is time to stop outsourcing your joy. It is time to build a life that does not require constant distraction to feel bearable. That is the moment when growth begins, not when you fill the void, but when you sit with it long enough to understand it. When you ask, "What have I been avoiding?" and you are brave enough to wait for the answer. There is a kind of power that is born in silence. High resilience. High knowing. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you become less desperate for validation. You stop chasing people who only love fragments of you. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that drain you. You start protecting your peace like it is sacred because it is. That shift changes everything. You no longer fear solitude. You begin to crave it. And here is the truth: real connection is not found in crowds. It is found in authenticity. One true friendship is more nourishing than 100 surface-level conversations. One quiet evening with yourself, fully present, is more healing than a dozen loud escapes. You were not made to be surrounded all the time. You were made to go inward often, to realign and remember who you are. So the next lesson is this: learn to be alone, not as a punishment, but as preparation. The strongest people are not those who never feel lonely. They are those who use loneliness to deepen, to question, to evolve. Every great transformation begins in solitude. The caterpillar does not become the butterfly in the spotlight. It happens in darkness, in silence, in stillness. Use this season of quiet to rebuild your roots, to write what you feel, to move your body not for appearance but for release, to forgive people who never apologized, not for them but so you can be free. This is not the end of your story. It is the intermission, the breath before the next rise. And it is sacred. There is a moment, often after 40, when the noise begins to fade and what remains is silence. Not the peaceful kind, the hollow kind. The kind that echoes when you sit alone and realize how much of your life has been filled with motion but not meaning. Friends grow distant. The phone does not ring as often. The routines you once relied on begin to feel empty. But within that silence lies your greatest opportunity. Because when the world quiets, your soul speaks. Most people fear being alone because they confuse it with being abandoned. But solitude is not punishment. It is a doorway. A sacred space where you can finally hear your own thoughts without interruption, where you stop performing and start reflecting. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And how can you master yourself if you are never truly alone with who you are? The loneliness you feel is not weakness. It is signal. It is your heart telling you it is time to stop outsourcing your joy. It is time to build a life that does not require constant distraction to feel bearable. That is the moment when growth begins, not when you fill the void. When you ask, "What have I been avoiding?" and you are brave enough to wait for the answer. There is a kind of power that is born in silence. A resilience. A knowing. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you become less desperate for validation. You stop chasing people who only love fragments of you. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that drain you. You start protecting your peace like it is sacred because it is. That shift changes everything. You no longer fear solitude. You begin to crave it. And here is the truth: real connection is not found in crowds. It is found in authenticity. One true friendship is more nourishing than 100 surface-level conversations. One quiet evening with yourself, fully present, is more healing than a dozen loud escapes. You were not made to be surrounded all the time. You are made to go inward often, to realign and remember who you are. So the next lesson is this: learn to be alone, not as a punishment, but as preparation. The strongest people are not those who never feel lonely. They are those who use loneliness to deepen, to question, to evolve. Every great transformation begins in solitude. The caterpillar does not become the butterfly in the spotlight. It happens in darkness, in silence, in stillness. Use this season of quiet to rebuild your roots, to write what you feel, to move your body, not for appearance, but for release, to forgive people who never apologized, not for them, but so you can be free. This is not the end of your story. It is the intermission, the breath before the next rise. And it is sacred. Life does not always ask for your permission. It interrupts. It bends plans. It introduces endings you never asked for. A diagnosis. A divorce. A failure that echoes louder than your effort. And in those moments, the temptation is to resist, to ask why me, to fight what already is. But here is the truth: what you cannot control, you are meant to confront, not with force, but with understanding. Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. That is not passivity. That is radical strength. Because acceptance is not giving up, it is stepping into reality with both eyes open. It is no longer wasting energy trying to change the unchangeable. It is taking all that fire and using it where it matters most: within. Control is an illusion we chase because uncertainty terrifies us. But the Stoics knew that serenity does not come from having power over life, it comes from having power over your response to it. And after 40, you start to understand how much of your suffering came not from events, but from the way you resisted them. The expectations you clung to. The stories you told yourself about how things should have been. Pain is part of life. But suffering is the story we attach to the pain. And when you learn to rewrite that story, you change your experience entirely. A setback becomes a lesson. A closed door becomes protection. A failure becomes a redirection. This is not just philosophy. It is survival. Because the moment you stop fighting life is the moment you begin to co-create with it. There's a peace that comes with releasing the need to control outcomes. You stop manipulating, overthinking, obsessing. You begin to show up fully, do your best, and let go of the rest. And slowly, you become unshakable not because life is easy, but because you have stopped expecting it to be. That is the gift of true resilience. The next lesson is this: learn to differentiate between effort and attachment. Give your all, but do not tie your worth to the results. Plant the seed, but do not demand the harvest on your timeline. Life unfolds in ways we cannot always predict, but that does not mean it is working against you. Often, it is removing what you were never meant to carry, redirecting you to something more aligned. Marcus Aurelius faced war, plague, betrayal, and yet he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. That is not just a quote. It is a lens. A way of seeing life not as something that happens to you, but something that happens for you when you decide to learn from everything. So whatever you are facing now, uncertainty, loss, change, pause. Breathe. Ask not how do I control this, but who can I become through this? That shift alone is the beginning of your transformation. Most people wait for a crisis to change. A wake minus up call. A loss. A breakdown. But what if transformation did not require destruction? What if you could begin again, not because you were forced to, but because you chose to? After 40, that choice becomes more urgent. You realize time is no longer endless, and peace is no longer optional. It must be created through structure, through clarity, through consistent action. Your mind is not your enemy, but it becomes one when left undirected. Thoughts, like water, need a container. Without it, they spill everywhere into worry, distraction, and self-minded sabotage. That is why routine matters. Not to control your life, but to contain your focus. To remind your body and mind each day, this is where we are going, and this is how we get there. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Simple. Direct. But most people skip the first part. They live by accident, not by design. They wake up and react to emails, to messages, to moods. But if you want a different life, you must begin each day with intention. What do I want to feel? Who do I want to be? What will I no longer tolerate? This is not about waking up at 5 a.m. or following a perfect schedule. It is about building rituals that anchor you to your highest self. A few minutes of stillness. I walk in the morning light. A daily act of gratitude or reflection. These are not luxuries, they are lifelines. They remind you that no matter how chaotic the world becomes, you have a center you can return to. And you will fall off track. That is part of the process. The lesson is not in avoiding failure. It is in creating systems that make it easier to return. Systems that support your values, not your vices. If you want to eat better, do not rely on willpower, change your environment. If you want to write more, schedule the time, remove the distractions. If you want more peace, be ruthless about what you allow into your space. Your calendar is a mirror. Look at how you spend your days, and you will see what you truly prioritize. If your peace is missing, do not ask where it went, ask where you gave it away. Rebuilding your life is not about grand gestures. It is about small, repeated choices that become habits and then identity. So the next lesson is this: design your days around who you want to become, not who you have been. Let each hour serve a purpose. Not perfection, but direction. Let each action reflect your values. Not rules, but reminders. You are not here to live on autopilot. You are here to create intentionally, courageously, consistently. If this message moved you, share it with someone who needs it. Because when you align your habits with your healing, life begins to respond. Doors open. Energy returns. The mind quiets. And suddenly, what once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable, not because the world changed, but because you did. At 40, the weight of old choices begins to surface. You remember the harsh words spoken in anger, the chances you did not take, the people you hurt, and the times you betrayed your own intuition just to feel loved or accepted. The guilt is quiet but persistent. It follows you in moments of stillness. And you wonder, could I have done better? The truth is yes. But you did not know better then. And the only way to honor the pain is to learn from it, not live in it. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." That includes the stories you tell yourself. Stories of shame. Stories of failure. Stories of not being good enough. These stories may feel familiar, but they are not truth. They are habits of thought. And you can rewrite them. Not with denial, but with compassion. You can say, I made mistakes. But I am not my mistakes. I am the person who survived them, who learned from them, who is still showing up. Self minus forgiveness does not mean erasing the past. It means extracting the wisdom. What did this experience teach me? How has it shaped my values, my empathy, my direction? When you approach your past with curiosity instead of judgment, it begins to soften. It becomes a teacher, not a tormentor. And here is a paradox: the more you forgive yourself, the easier it becomes to forgive others. Because you begin to see the humanity in everyone. The wounds behind their actions. The fears behind their silence. You stop needing apologies to heal. You stop needing others to understand. Your peace no longer depends on anything outside of you. That is liberation. The next lesson is this: forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength. It is choosing to no longer let the past hold your future hostage. It is choosing to be free. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. Your peace is worth more than any grudge. Your future is worth more than any resentment. And your soul is too sacred to be anchored to regrets. So say this quietly to yourself: I release what I cannot change. I forgive who I was. I honor who I am becoming, and repeat it as often as needed. Not because it erases the past, but because it reclaims your power in the present. After 40, relationships begin to reveal their true nature. Some deepen. Others dissolve. And many simply drift, not with malice, but with time. You start to see people not just for who they are, but for what they bring out in you. Do they energize or exhaust you? Do they nourish your spirit or feed your anxiety? These questions are no longer optional. They become necessary. Because at this stage of life, peace is a priority, not a luxury. For years you may have tolerated certain connections out of obligation. You smiled to keep the peace. You stayed in touch to avoid discomfort. But now you feel the weight of those exchanges. The one-sided conversations. The subtle disrespect. The feeling of shrinking every time you are around certain people. And something in you whispers no more. That whisper is your wisdom speaking. Listen to it. Marcus Aurelius advised, associate with those who will make a better man of you. That is not elitism. That is alignment. When you are rebuilding your life, your environment must match your values. The people around you either support your evolution or stall it. There is no neutral ground. You become like the energy you consistently absorb. This is not about cutting everyone off. It is about being intentional. About knowing the difference between a connection that challenges you to grow and one that constantly depletes you. Between someone who calls you out with love and someone who criticizes you to feel superior. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to choose presence over performance, silence over small talk, depth over quantity. Sometimes the loneliest feeling comes from being surrounded by people who do not truly see you, who want the old version of you, the one who stayed quiet, who played small, who said yes when you meant no. But growth requires shedding. And some people will resist your change because it challenges their comfort. Let them. You do not owe anyone your stagnation. The next lesson is this: curate your circle with the same care you curate your thoughts. Your time is sacred. Your energy is sacred. And the people who have access to you should reflect that. Be with those who inspire reflection, not comparison. Who make you feel more like yourself, not less. Who remind you, by their presence, that you are not alone on this path. And if you find yourself walking alone for a while, let it be. The right people will find you when you stop hiding who you are. When you stop chasing attention and start radiating authenticity. Real connection begins when you no longer fear solitude. When you no longer bend just to belong. Protect your space. It is where your future is being built. Success for most of your early life was defined for you. By family. By culture. By media. It meant more money, more recognition, more achievement. And perhaps, for a while, you chased it. Maybe you even caught it. But something shifted. You hit the goal, and the fulfillment did not come. Or worse, it came and vanished just as quickly. And now at 40, you begin to ask a deeper question: what if success is not what I was taught to want? There is a quiet kind of success that does not announce itself. It does not come with applause. It is not always visible to others. But you feel it. In the calm you carry. In the boundaries you keep. In the way you no longer explain yourself to be understood. That kind of success is measured in peace, not performance. In alignment, not accumulation. And that shift changes everything. Marcus Aurelius never sought fame. He ruled an empire, but wrote his deepest thoughts in private journals. Why? Because he knew the only empire worth mastering was the one within. And so do you. At this stage in life, success becomes simpler but more profound. It becomes about showing up honestly. Saying no without guilt. Saying yes without fear. Choosing presence over productivity. And understanding that your worth is not tied to your output. There is a lie many people carry that if they stop pushing, they will fall behind. But behind what? Behind who? This race was never real. It was a projection. True growth is not competitive. It is individual. Success is no longer about what you can prove, it is about what you can live without proving. It is about how you feel when you are alone with your thoughts, your choices, your values. You begin to realize that the most successful people are not the loudest. They are not the busiest. They are not always online, always posting, always performing. They are grounded, present, selective. They know that life is not about filling every moment, it is about honoring it. With presence, with clarity, with love. The next lesson is this: redefine success in a way that serves your soul, not your ego. Let it be felt, not flaunted. Let it be measured in the peace you feel at the end of the day, in the quality of your sleep, in the strength of your relationships, in the lightness of your breath when you are no longer pretending. You may still pursue goals. That is beautiful. But now you pursue them with detachment, with grace, with the understanding that you are already whole. That achievement is an expression, not a replacement of your worth. And in that awareness, you find something far greater than success. You find freedom. In the end, rebuilding your life after 40 is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It is about peeling away the layers of expectation, of fear, of comparison, until what remains is something raw, real, and unshakably yours. You are not starting over. You are starting from experience. And that is the most powerful place to begin. There is no final destination. No perfect version of you waiting on the other side of all this work. There is only the present moment and who you choose to be inside it. That is what the Stoics understood. That peace is not found in changing circumstances, but in transforming how you meet them. In how you walk through the chaos with clarity. In how you hold space for stillness even when life moves fast. Marcus Aurelius, near the end of his life, wrote not about glory but about presence. About humility. About aligning with nature, with reason, with purpose. He did not claim to have it all figured out. He simply committed to showing up each day with awareness, discipline, and grace. And so can you. The final lesson is this: everything you seek, clarity, strength, healing, meaning, is already within you. But it needs your attention. It needs your protection. It needs your decision. Not once, but every day. You do not have to fix everything at once. You just have to choose, again and again, not to abandon yourself. Wake up each morning and ask, what does peace look like today? And then build your day around that answer. Make your bed like it is an act of devotion. Move your body like it is a form of gratitude. Speak your truth with kindness. Say no with courage. Say yes with joy. And at night, reflect not on what you failed to do, but on how you honored your intention to live with presence. Life after 40 is not a decline, it is a distillation. A return to essence. A refinement of focus. You stop chasing. You start noticing. You realize the miracle is not somewhere far ahead. It is in how you show up for the simple, sacred moments in front of you. And when the world gets loud again, and it will return to what you now know, that your peace is your power. Your response is your responsibility. And your life is entirely yours to create. If this journey has helped you see yourself more clearly, share it. Someone else may need this reminder too. Now, go live it. One choice, one breath, one moment at a time.